Golden Tales.
The summer of 2020 was hotter than usual in the quiet town of Maple. Birds chirped lazily, and the sidewalks shimmered under the afternoon sun. Olivia, a bright-eyed college student on break, had just arrived at her grandmother's house. The old wooden home, with its peeling paint and creaky porch swing, held the scent of time and memories. Her grandmother, Eleanor, was in her 80s, now sharp-minded but slower in her step. Olivia had always admired her strength. Widowed young, Eleanor had raised 2 children and never complained. Her house was filled with traces of the past, black and white photographs on the wall, shelves lined with ceramic birds, and the faint smell of lavender and old books lingering in the air. That afternoon, while Eleanor napped in her armchair with a crocheted blanket over her legs, Olivia wandered through the familiar creaking hallway. Drawn by curiosity and a sense of nostalgia, she found herself climbing the narrow wooden staircase to the attic, a place she'd never dared explore alone as a child. Pushing open the creaky attic door, she was hit by a wave of warm, dusty air. Sunlight filtered through a small circular window, casting golden rays across the cluttered space. The room was quiet except for the occasional creak of the floorboards under her feet. Stacks of cardboard boxes leaned precariously against one another. She ran her fingers along the spines of old books, picked up a small music box that no longer played, and unfolded a faded dress that must have once been the color of sky. Each item felt like a whisper from another time. In one corner, she found a set of neatly stacked photo albums. Flipping through the pages, she saw images of her mother as a child, her uncle in a Halloween costume, her grandmother and grandfather dancing in the backyard. Some photos were bent and yellowed, but all were full of life. Then, half buried under a heavy wool coat, she noticed something unusual. A small wooden box, darker than the rest, carved with delicate patterns. It was tucked carefully behind an old trunk, as if intentionally hidden. Something about it felt ... personal. Sacred. She pulled it out and set it gently on the floor. The lid creaked as she opened it, revealing a stack of neatly folded papers and a single envelope, yellowed with age and brittle at the corners. It was addressed to Miss Eleanor Rhodes. No return address. Postmarked June 17, 1970. Olivia's heart skipped a beat. She turned the envelope over. The flap was still sealed. She hesitated. A letter that old and unopened. It had to mean something, but was it right to open it? Her hands trembled slightly as she weighed the choice. She glanced toward the stairway. Her grandmother was still asleep downstairs. Olivia took a deep breath. With gentle fingers, she broke the fragile seal and unfolded the single sheet of paper inside. The ink had faded slightly but was still legible. My dearest Eleanor ... The first line alone made Olivia sit down on the attic floor. The handwriting was elegant and expressive, like a voice from the past. If you're reading this, then perhaps the letter finally found its way to you. I never meant to leave the way I did. There are things I should have told you before I left. But I was afraid of what it would mean for us, afraid of what it would mean for me. Olivia turned the page over, breath caught in her chest. The words painted a vivid picture. 2 young lovers caught between duty and desire, separated by fear and circumstance. She whispered to herself, "Who were you, mystery writer? What happened to you?" She read on. "You once asked me if I believed in fate. I didn't answer then, but I do now. Finding you was the closest thing to magic I ever knew. But I had demons, Eleanor, things I never wanted to burden you with. So I ran, cowardly, I know, but it was the only way I knew how to protect you from me." A lump formed in Olivia's throat. She folded the letter carefully, as if afraid the paper might crumble. Downstairs, Eleanor stirred, her eyes fluttering open for a brief second before closing again, unaware that the past she had buried so deeply was about to resurface, and with it, everything would change. The attic grew quieter as Olivia stared at the letter in her lap. It was as though time had paused, giving her the space to absorb every carefully written word. The light from the small window shifted slowly across the dusty floor. As the sun began to dip toward the horizon, she read the next lines, her voice a whisper only the ghosts of the house could hear. "Do you remember the night we danced under the bridge? Just after it rained, you wore that yellow dress with the tiny white flowers. I told you the world could end right then, and I'd be okay. Because I had that moment with you. Tears welled in her eyes. She didn't know this version of her grandmother, the young woman who inspired such poetry. She wondered what Eleanor must have looked like then, full of hope and love, unaware of what was to come. The letter continued. They came for me the next day. Draft, notice, Vietnam. I didn't tell you. I couldn't. You had just gotten into nursing school. You were finally starting your life. And I was being pulled into a war I didn't understand. Olivia paused. Her grandmother had never spoken about the war. It wasn't just silence, it was like that chapter didn't exist. She thought of all the times she asked about Eleanor's youth and was met with vague smiles and subject changes. I left a note, but I doubt it ever found you. I was shipped out before sunrise. My plan was to come back to find you and explain. But things, they didn't go the way I imagined. The attic felt smaller, the air heavier. Olivia looked around at the forgotten objects, now charged with meaning. An old clock ticking, a broken radio, a music box with a ballerina inside. Were these things her grandmother once shared with James? Were they part of that life? She continued reading. I was injured in my second month. Shrapnel to the leg. I spent nearly 6 weeks in a hospital tent. I asked the nurse every day if I could send a letter home. But my unit had moved, and the addresses changed. Everything was chaos. I never even got to say goodbye. A tear slipped down Olivia's cheek. She gently wiped it away and looked at the envelope again, amazed that after so many years, it had survived. You once asked me if I believed in fate. I didn't answer then, but I do now. Finding you was the closest thing to magic I ever knew. But I had demons, Eleanor, things I never wanted to burden you with. So I ran. Cowardly, I know, but it was the only way I knew how to protect you from me. She turned the paper over, but the letter was near its end. If this ever reaches you, I want you to know, I never stopped thinking about you. Not for a single day. If there is a life after this one, I hope we meet again, under that bridge, just after the rain. Signed, James. Olivia folded the letter carefully and pressed it against her chest. Her thoughts raced. Who was James really? Did anyone in the family know? Why had her grandmother never mentioned him? How had this letter been lost for so long, only to surface now? She stared at the small attic window as a bird landed on the sill. The sound of its wings startled her, pulling her back to the present. She reached into the box again, hoping for more. A photograph, a second letter, anything, but there was nothing. Only that one letter, aged by time and filled with a love that hadn't aged a day. Then she spotted something tucked beneath the box lining. A ribbon, faded blue. She picked it up slowly. It had the faintest trace of perfume, or perhaps she imagined it. Olivia closed her eyes and let herself wonder. What would her grandmother say when she learned Olivia had opened it? Would she be angry? Sad? Relieved? She climbed slowly down the attic stairs, the letter still in her hands. Her footsteps echoed softly through the hallway. She paused at the top step, unsure whether to hide it or face what might come. A floorboard creaked. Olivia turned. Eleanor stood behind her, hand resting on the railing, eyes not surprised but full of memory, not anger, not fear, recognition. You found it, she said softly. Olivia tried to speak, but her voice cracked. I didn't mean to. Eleanor stepped closer and knelt beside her with a quiet strength. She reached out, took the envelope from Olivia, and held it to her chest. I always hoped it would come, she said, her voice breaking. They sat there in silence. 2 generations, 1 love story, finally uncovered. The air was cooler on the porch, carrying with it the earthy scent of evening. Olivia sat beside her grandmother, who was wrapped in a soft wool shawl. Despite the lingering warmth of summer, the letter rested between them on a small table, folded neatly, no longer a mystery, but not yet fully explained. Eleanor's eyes stared out into the horizon, but her mind was elsewhere. His name was James Harper. We met in the spring of 1969. I was volunteering at the community center. He brought his little sister there for piano lessons. At first, he barely spoke, but the 3rd week, he brought me a book, Pride and Prejudice. Said it reminded him of me. Olivia smiled gently. Romantic. He was, Eleanor replied, her voice soft, but not in the grand, dramatic way. He paid attention, always remembered small things. The way I liked my tea, how I hummed when I was nervous. He once wrote a note on a napkin and tucked it into my coat pocket. I didn't find it for days. It just said, "You are the first thing that makes the world feel quiet." She paused, her hand tightening on the armrest. We were young. We didn't think much beyond the next day. He wanted to be a writer. I had just gotten into nursing school. We'd sit under that old stone bridge outside town and talk about our dreams. Olivia leaned in closer. "You really loved him?" Eleanor nodded. Her eyes glistened, catching the last rays of the sun. "When he disappeared, I thought, I thought it was me, that I had said something. Or maybe he realized I wasn't enough. For weeks, I waited. Then came the news. He'd joined the army. But no goodbye. Not even a word." Her voice cracked. I convinced myself I was just a chapter he wanted to forget. There was a silence between them, broken only by the creak of the wooden rocking chairs. "I buried every piece of him," Eleanor continued. "Packed away the memory, the photo, the ribbon he gave me, even the music box. I met your grandfather the next summer. He was kind, dependable. I told myself it was time to move on." She looked at Olivia with a faint smile. "And I did. I had a good life. I really did. But I never stopped wondering what happened to James. Never stopped feeling that empty space in my story." Olivia looked at the folded letter on the table. "He tried to come back." "Yes," Eleanor whispered. "And I never knew all these years. And I never knew." The wind picked up slightly, rustling the leaves of the big oak tree in the yard. A bird called in the distance. Eleanor reached for Olivia's hand. "Do you believe in second chances?" she asked. Olivia hesitated, then nodded. "Sometimes the second chance isn't for us. Sometimes it's for the story itself. So it can finally be told." They sat in silence again, the kind that didn't need to be filled, the kind that acknowledged pain and beauty at once. Then Eleanor said, almost to herself, "I wonder if he ever knew that I kept the ribbon, that I kept the bridge in my dreams." They spent the next hour talking about James, about love, about what might have been. Eleanor's voice wavered at times, but she spoke with a clarity that made Olivia feel as though her grandmother was shedding decades of weight. Later that night, as Olivia lay in bed, she found herself imagining the version of Eleanor in James's letters, young, fearless, full of wonder. She tried to picture the two of them together walking hand in hand, laughing beside the river, dancing under the bridge. That image stayed with her as she drifted to sleep. The next morning, Olivier woke early. The house was quiet. She tiptoed into the kitchen and found her grandmother already awake, sipping tea by the window. "I couldn't sleep," Eleanor said simply. Olivia sat across from her. "Do you want to try to find him?" she asked. Eleanor looked surprised. "You think that's possible?" "I don't know," Olivia admitted, "but I can try. The internet, libraries, veterans groups. If he published anything, maybe there's a trail." Eleanor nodded slowly. "If you think there's a chance, even the smallest one, then yes, I want to know." And just like that, the decision was made. They would look. That afternoon, Olivia pulled out her laptop and notebook and began the search. James Harper, Vietnam veteran, possibly writer. The results were vague at first too. Many James Harpers, not enough details. But with Eleanor's help, they narrowed things down. He was from upstate New York, born in 1947, had a younger sister named Lydia. That alone removed dozens of false leads. Olivia sent emails, checked old archives, posted on veteran forums. Days passed with little progress, but neither of them gave up. Each evening they sat together and talked. Eleanor told stories Olivia had never heard about her childhood, about her hopes before life became complicated. The more Olivia listened, the more she realized how much her grandmother had kept buried. Then, on the fifth day, something appeared. A small blog post on a forgotten literary website, dated 2003. A short memoir titled Letters authored by James Harper. It spoke of war, of regret, of a woman in a yellow dress. It ended with a line that made Olivia's breath catch. "If you're reading this, I hope you remember the bridge, the rain, and the silence that once felt like home." She printed it out and handed it to Eleanor without a word. Her grandmother read it in silence, tears falling slowly, one after another. "He remembered," she said. The days after the memoir discovery were filled with anticipation and silence. Eleanor spent long hours by the window, her gaze fixed on the trees outside, while Olivia followed every digital lead she could find. Most paths led nowhere, but neither of them gave up. It was as if they were walking through fog, certain there was something on the other side, but unsure how far they had to go. Then one afternoon, as rain tapped gently on the roof, Olivia received an email. She gasped and turned the laptop toward her grandmother. "It's from Lydia Harper," she said. Eleanor leaned in slowly. "Dear Olivia," the message began, "my name is Lydia Hartley. My brother, James Harper, passed away in 2017. Recently, I was sorting through his belongings and came across several items connected to someone named Eleanor Rhodes. I searched the name and found your inquiry. If Eleanor is still with us, I would be honored to send them to you." The letter ended with a phone number and a short postscript. He never stopped writing about her. Eleanor covered her mouth with her hand. He kept writing. 2 days later, a carefully wrapped package arrived at their doorstep. Olivia brought it inside like it was made of glass. Together, they opened it on the dining room table. Inside were several old notebooks, a pair of dog tags, a photograph of Eleanor and James under the stone bridge, and a single envelope. It was yellowed but sealed, her name written across it in James's handwriting. Eleanor picked up the photograph first. "I didn't know this existed," she whispered. The two young lovers in the picture were laughing, Eleanor's head thrown back, James looking at her like she was the only person on earth. The notebooks were filled with half-finished letters, unsent drafts, and diary-like entries. Some pages were stained, others had pressed leaves folded between them. It was a lifetime of thoughts, kept secret until now. Then came the letter. Eleanor opened it slowly, almost reverently, as Olivia watched in complete silence. "My dearest Eleanor, if this finds you, I hope it means that the universe was kinder than I expected. I've written you more letters than I can count. Some I burned, others I kept, always intending to send them, but never finding the courage. You were the best part of my life. Not a memory, not a regret, just the clearest moment of love I ever knew." Eleanor paused, pressing the paper to her chest. Tears welled in her eyes before she continued. "They say time heals all wounds, but I don't think that's true. Some wounds stay open so we remember where the love lived. I built a life after you, Kwaya. Simple, but never full. There was always a U-shaped space in everything. I want you to know I never stopped looking. I checked post offices. I sent letters to old addresses, but nothing came back. Still, I hope. If you're reading this, I hope you found happiness. I hope you danced again. I hope you loved truly and deeply. I hope you live. And if there's any small corner of your heart that ever thinks of me, I hope it's with warmth, because that's how I always carried you, with warmth and gratitude. Forever yours, James." Eleanor said nothing. Her hands trembled. Then she folded the letter carefully and placed it back in its envelope. She looked at Olivia and smiled through tears. He never forgot. Over the next few days, Eleanor seemed lighter. She moved slowly, but with peace. She began writing again, something she hadn't done in years. Little notes, small reflections, tiny stories scribbled in a leather journal. One morning, Olivia woke up to find her grandmother already dressed, sitting at the table with the framed photograph, the ribbon, and James's letter beside her. "I'd like to go to the bridge," Eleanor said. They drove out just before noon. The stone bridge was still standing, worn by time but solid. Moss clung to the sides, and the river below flowed steadily. Eleanor walked slowly, Olivia by her side, holding her arm. They stood in the center of the bridge. Just as the wind picked up, Eleanor closed her eyes. "This is where it all made sense," she said. "Not in what we lost, but in what we had." She took out the letter and a small pressed lavender sprig. Olivia stepped back as Eleanor placed them on the bridge's stone railing. "I forgive the years," she whispered. A few weeks later, Eleanor passed away peacefully in her sleep. On her nightstand sat the framed photo, the ribbon, and a note that simply read, "Don't be sad. I got my letter." At the funeral, Olivia stood beneath the old oak tree, reading aloud from James's final letter. Guests were silent, many wiping tears from their cheeks. Love stories were rarely so complete event when they arrived decades too late. In the months that followed, Olivia wrote everything down. Every word, every letter, every emotion. The memoir became her own. She returned to the bridge once more, this time alone. She brought a new letter to her own end, let it drift down into the river. Some stories aren't meant to stay buried, she whispered. Thank you for letting me finish yours. And for the first time, the bridge felt like it belonged to her too.